He's a seasoned healthcare technology leader with deep-rooted passion for leveraging AI to transform sleep medicine and improve patient outcomes. I've known Fred for about 8 or 9 months, and it's awesome to meet somebody in our industry that's come from outside of our industry, from another healthcare industry, comes in, learns our industry, and is able to offer a fresh look at technology. Fred drives what we do at Ensodata, so it's been awesome getting to know him and understanding his passion for our industry. Like I said, he's offering just really neat insights to what we're doing in our industry and driving where our technology is going for Ensodata. So I think you guys are really in for really enjoy Fred's talk here on multi-night testing. And so let me introduce you to Fred Turkington.
Good afternoon, everybody. I think going last at one of these conferences can be both very good and very bad. Bad because I know your attention span is waning. You've been staving off your needs to go do things like happy hour and get out of these chairs for hours. But at the same time, I got to hear everything that other speakers said today. So I'm going to try and tie together a few of the presentations we've already heard into one big presentation. I wanted to start with a poll, but I'm actually going to revise my poll. How many of y'all work at night or work in a lab setting? Okay. And how about for the rest of you? Do you do home sleep testing, run a lab management of some sort? All right, so I would say that's about half and half. For those of you who work at night, do you love working at night? And or do you feel like working night tech in a lab is the place that you want to end your sleep tech career? Or are you hoping to go somewhere else with your sleep tech career? Staying on nights, happy with nights. Right. So then for the other half of you, this will be a really useful conversation. Now, for those of you who do home sleep testing, do you do it with EEG? Home sleep testing, do you send the patient home with EEG? No. Okay. How about with 2 effort belts rather than a single effort belt? Not anymore. Can you say more about why not anymore? Cheaper? Failure rate, lower failure rate. Simpler for the patient. Put it on, wear it. Now, you'd think that we would want the most clinically sophisticated test for the patient in the home environment. After all, we go to all this trouble to bring them into the lab to make sure they're getting a good diagnosis. Why not give them a good diagnosis at home? Do you feel like not having that second effort belt or not having the EEG results in a worse diagnosis for your patient? EEG, effort belt, no. Yes, that means you can't tell if they're asleep without being here.
Because people, if they're awake, they slap.
No worries. Okay. So that sort of sets the ground for where we all are coming into this room today. And I love the range of numbers on the possibility of this statistic we've heard today. As few as 29 million Americans with sleep apnea, as many as 70 million, nobody really knows. And at least since 2013, we estimate that 4 in 5 of them has not yet received a diagnosis for a sleep disorder. So in the Carolinas, that's 2.6 million of us. And there aren't 2.6 million people in this room to take care of all of them. So what are the reasons why we test at home? Why don't we bring everybody into the lab? If it's this great diagnostic environment, then make sure you can tell when they're actually asleep. There are practical limitations. First one that you might be familiar with. Who got their best night of sleep they've had in months last night? Maybe if you're a parent home with kids at home, maybe you got a better night of sleep than typical. When you sleep in an unfamiliar environment, it's been proven that you don't sleep as well. Patients coming into the lab for a one-night test are not going to have a typical night of sleep. We see increases in sleep latency, wake after sleep onset, although interestingly enough, get about the same amount of night sleep. Staffing. We can't bring every patient into the lab. Did you know that the number of RPSGTs has stayed the same or slightly decreased over the last 8 years? Yeah. So we have this growing population in this country with an increasing prevalence of sleep apnea, and the same or fewer people to take care of them. But what I'm here to talk about today is another good reason to test patients in a home environment. Night-to-night variability in the burden of sleep disorders. I want to talk about a study that was published in CHEST in 2020 by these researchers at Johns Hopkins. It covered 10,340 patients. So think about how many patients go through your lab in a typical month. Multiply that into a typical year. Think about how many years of lab you would need to replicate the sample size. This is a huge study. For all these patients, they got a flow-based home sleep test, type 3, and the patients had 3 consecutive nights. And what they found is if you had only tested those patients for 1 night, you would have a 20% misclassification rate. So 1 out of every 5 of those patients, you would have diagnosed with the wrong severity of sleep apnea. If you only look at the first night, nearly 93% of people without sleep apnea are correctly diagnosed. That's a good sign. We're properly ruling people out of this disorder on the first night. And at the other end, if they have severe sleep apnea, nearly 90% of them were also correctly diagnosed. So the really obvious ones, the ones where when they walk into the lab, you go, we're going to be doing a split night on you. And they plotted all 10,000 of these patients on one chart. Night to night, typically the standard deviation was 4.4 AHI points. So if their actual AHI severity across all 3 nights was 15, then they could have had as high as 20 or as low as 10, typically. There are some outliers in this population, though. If you look on the x-axis, there we go. For one of these patients with an AHI around 20, and on the y-axis, how much deviation there was. You can find plenty of patients whose true AHI is 20, but they had as much as 20 AHI points variety night to night. So that's somebody with an AHI of 20 on the first night, an AHI of 40 on the second night, an AHI of 23 on the third night. Wild variety testing. So at Ensodata, we saw this paper, and we thought, hey, we've got a big database of sleep studies, can we replicate it? So we presented some research at the sleep conference this year that we did together with Kaiser Permanente and UW Medicine. We took 14,000 patients who had between 1 and 15 consecutive nights of sleep study. And what we found is that if you had only looked at the first night of data, 12% of people would have been incorrectly diagnosed as not having sleep apnea. So they've got this daytime sleepiness, they came in for a test, they sat through months after their consult, waiting to finally get the test, and they tell their wife, I told you, I don't have sleep apnea. But if you just tested them for another night or 2, you would have shown them you actually do, and we can treat you and help you feel better during the day. A quarter of the patients in this sample went up at least one severity category, from mild to moderate or moderate to severe. And while half of patients had no change across, 4% jumped two severity categories. So their initial test said they were mild, but they're actually severe. And we also saw similar, plus or minus 5, plus or minus 4 events per hour is the typical range for a patient when you test them across multiple nights. We also saw what those authors from Johns Hopkins saw about normals. You correctly diagnose them pretty well on the first night. Same with severe patients. So if you look on the chart here on night 1, severe patients, you only misdiagnose 20%. Normal patients, you only misdiagnose 13%. But for moderate patients, a third of the patients who are truly moderate sleep apnea sufferers, you'll misdiagnose with only one night of testing. And what's really cool is that this misdiagnosis rate dropped off dramatically by night 2 and night 3. So by adding a single additional night of sleep testing, you can drop this misdiagnosis rate in half, from 30% down to 17%. By adding just one more night of testing. So why don't we test them for multiple nights?
Okay.
What's that?
Pay.
Pay. Pay in what direction?
Diagnostic work.
So insurance only pay for one night. So you can't get paid and it still costs you money to run that second
Yeah,
night.
a lot of will do the second night for free, but that's because working correctly or patient not-
So you end up doing that second night for free sometimes, uncompensated, because the patient couldn't get the device to work properly. What are other reasons that you've seen why you test for one night? Or how many of you do feel like it's just habit? Never really question whether you would want extra nights.
Another might be the number of patients that you have to get in and done. So you don't have enough units to stay out there 2 or 3 nights. You have to get them back in and turn around for the next one, because I don't know about everybody else, but like us, we're 3 months booked out. Sometimes 4, it just depends. And we have quite a few providers. So that turnaround time, especially on the home study, well, in lab as well.
Sure.
We just don't have the number of techs needed or the number of units needed to be able to do multiple nights.
So you have this backlog that's 3-4 months long. You've got a certain number of these pretty expensive home sleep test devices that are stocked in your lab. You need them back so that you can get them to the next patient. Okay. Disposable and what? Cost. Because you got to pay more for every night out. So you're doing extra nights, basically gambling that at least one of the nights will work, but not relying on all of them. Yeah, so you all accurately predicted what I was going to say. Reimbursement. You don't get reimbursed for more than one night. It's not worth your while to try and do extra nights by and large. Disposables are expensive. It costs more for every night that you do, and you're not getting paid for those extra nights. Or if you have a reusable unit, they're expensive. And you have to take up your text time to score the home test. So extra time that you don't have, that you're not getting paid for.
A lot, like our device is not hold 2 nights. The patient will have to download next night.
So some devices that can only hold one night of data, now you've got to get the patient to come back and then take it back out. Who's going to do that? Yeah.
Some of the older units take 8 hours. That's what they store on. The newer units, by talking to people, 4 hours. So you to an 8-hour one night.
Gotcha. So we're saying here, hey, some of the older units report up to 8 hours of data. Hey, can you kind of stretch it, do 4 hours one night, 4 hours the next night? So I want to make a pitch to you for why you ought to consider moving to multi-night testing, and why now is the right time to do it. First off, reimbursement models are changing. Who here knows how much their lab typically gets paid to run a home sleep test? So we heard 50 to 100 over here.
20.
$100 is good, you're saying, but can be much lower depending on the contract. Yeah. Well, nationally, Medicare will pay you $130 to run a home sleep test that has sleep staging. They'll pay you $99 to run the test that doesn't have staging. So about $100 is what you can expect for the home test. Put a pin in there. Devices cost less now. We'll go into that. And with new treatments coming online, like GLP-1s that we heard about 2 sessions ago, like oral appliances with things like Apnimed coming, there are a wider variety of things that patients are going to use to treat their sleep apnea. And guess what? None of these things plug into the cloud and have a data download. How are you going to track your patients when they're using GLP-1s or using Apnimed if you don't have a way of testing them at home across multiple nights as they go into their therapy? And as auto scoring gets better and better and can do things like add sleep staging on the home test in a way that people can't score without looking at EEGs, the burden of having your staff have to stick around and score the home test is also going down. If you try and buy a traditional home sleep test device, it'll run you in the thousands of dollars. There are new home sleep test devices, reusable or disposable, where the cost has come down to under $100 per device. So if you've got this 4-month backlog, think about seeing 12 times as many patients for the same cost of device, rather than devices that you probably still have on the shelves of your lab from older. I told you I would put a pin in how much you're getting paid for a home test. Imagine this. You've got your newfangled practice that is totally on board with these new treatment modalities. Your patient comes in, they get a $100 home sleep test device. You tell them, hold on to that device for the next 2 months. We're going to run a sleep test on you. You get $100 back for running the sleep test. Provider's going to prescribe you one of these new treatment modalities. You're getting an oral appliance, you're getting a GLP-1. We're going to see how this affects your AHI. You run a home sleep test equivalent on them every night for the next 2 months on your very cheap device, and you're getting paid the whole time to do that extra testing. You get $20 when you set them up. You get $50 a month when they run their testing. And you can get another $50 if you spend 20 minutes on the phone with them. That's what Ray was just the read of the sleep test? Yeah. A sleep physician in your lab, typically, there's also outsourced readers that will do that for $30, $40. So if you want to take that out into the cost part of the equation. But for the RPM portion of this doesn't require a physician read. You're doing so many nights that if any given night is a little bit off, it kind of comes out in the wash. So Medicare, CMS, they don't require a physician signature on these. The device and the data that come off of it are enough. So there are $100 sleep tests out there, pair with mobile app, enable you to bill this additional $150-ish per patient if you keep them on a 3-month-long monitoring program. And the monitoring device is the same thing as the sleep testing device. Give the patient the sleep testing device, they keep it for a couple months. Costs 12 times less than your traditional HST, so you can afford to have it out of your lab, you can afford to have a lot more of them, you can get to that backlog a lot quicker. So why don't we test multi-night, and why is now the right time to consider it? Well, the reimbursement model is changing. You can now get paid to see patients over time rather than that one night of testing. The devices cost way less than they used to. The things that patients will become treated with won't report the data back to you in the cloud. You'll need to give them a device to measure them. And the scoring is reliable now. You don't need to spend staff time on the scoring. So I'm going to let y'all out a little early, or we'll have some time for questions. But I want to leave y'all with a quote from the president of Knox. You'll hear from Emerson tomorrow. Sleep testing in the future is going to evolve from single night of testing to more consistent long-term monitoring. I'll leave it there for questions. Oh, I really lost it all. All right, who doesn't believe me?
So in other words, you use the same code.
So one of these, something like this. So this is worn on the wrist with a little cuff on the fingertip. So how do you set it up for the patient and apply it?
Like one night a day.
They just put it on and use it whenever they want. A minute ago, Ray was discussing that there's some changes upcoming next year. Hey, I'll clap once in here. Right. I'm confused had a question. I wanted to ask it.
Question was, does have like.
So I think Ray had really interesting things to say about that in the last session. Generally, these devices upload to the cloud rather than patients having to bring it back into the lab. That's sort of become the standard, the state-of-the-art in sleep testing now, is not forcing patients to drive back to the lab with their device in order to tell if that night of data is adequate. Now, y'all probably have patients who are like, I don't want to use a phone now. Is that right? Who here has parents in their 80s or older that still can use a smartphone? Yeah. Do they do okay with the phone, or you always help them out? Always help them out. But they get a good look at the data. All right, what are the questions? All right, Cal. Thanks for listening. Enjoy having.
students